Steve Jobs Part 5, Return to Apple and Transformation of the Company. When Steve Jobs walked back into Apple in late 1996, he entered a company that was almost unrecognizable from the one he had founded 2 decades earlier. Apple was hemorrhaging money. Its product lineup was bloated and confusing. Its software strategy was collapsing. Morale was low, innovation was stagnant, and analysts predicted bankruptcy within a year. To many, Apple was a fading relic of the early PC era. But for Steve Jobs, this broken Apple was a challenge, a canvas waiting to be reborn. He did not return as the triumphant founder reclaiming his throne. Officially, he was just an advisor. But everyone sensed the shift in gravity immediately. Jobs' presence carried weight. His intensity filled conference rooms. His sharp questions sliced through vague presentations. He listened, he observed, and quietly, he began to take control. And within months, he was back at the helm. First as de facto leader, then as interim CEO, and eventually as the undisputed force guiding Apple's future. He often joked that iCEO wasn't short for interim, but for in charge. Apple desperately needed focus, discipline, and a vision. Jobs provided all three, with the firmness of a craftsman, the instinct of an artist, and the relentlessness of a man who had tasted failure and learned from it. His first move was ruthless. Apple's sprawling product lineup, dozens of models, variations, and confusing options had to go. Jobs believed in simplicity, clarity, and purpose. He famously drew a simple 2x2 grid on a whiteboard: consumer versus professional, desktop versus portable. That's it, he declared. 4 great products, no more, no less. Everything else was eliminated. It was shocking, painful, and absolutely necessary. Dozens of projects were killed. Engineers who had spent years building products saw them vanish overnight. But Jobs knew Apple couldn't survive without radical simplification. Focus was not a suggestion, it was a mandate. Next, he slashed partnerships that diluted Apple's identity. He ended licensing deals for Macintosh clones, rejecting short-term gains in favor of long-term control. He consolidated teams, removed layers of management, and demanded excellence in every corner of the company. He also brought in a group of trusted advisors, his top 100, the inner circle who would shape Apple's strategic direction. Together, they redefined Apple's culture: fewer committees, faster decisions, a relentless emphasis on craftsmanship, cross-disciplinary collaboration, secrecy as a competitive weapon, perfection as the standard. And above all, Jobs restored something Apple had lost: its belief in itself. One of his greatest early victories came from an unlikely source: Microsoft. The relationship between the two companies had long been fraught with rivalry and tension. Many inside Apple viewed Microsoft as the antagonist, the competitor that had dominated the industry while Apple stumbled. But Jobs was pragmatic. Apple needed software support, financial stability, and, most importantly, validation. In 1997, at the Macworld Expo, Jobs made a shocking announcement. Apple and Microsoft were entering a partnership. Bill Gates appeared on a giant screen via satellite, agreeing to continue developing Microsoft Office for the Mac and investing $150 million in Apple. The crowd booed, but Jobs understood that swallowing pride was part of rebuilding. Apple needed allies more than it needed applause. While Jobs stabilized the company's finances and structure, he also pushed for something far more important: a product that would redefine Apple's identity. That product was the iMac. Designed by Jony Ive, a quiet, thoughtful industrial designer who had been overlooked until Jobs rediscovered him, the iMac was bold, colorful, playful, and unmistakably Apple. It rejected the beige, boxy computers of the era in favor of translucent curves and vibrant hues. It was not just a machine, it was a statement of intent, a revival of Apple's creative spirit. Jobs and Ive became one of the most famous partnerships in modern design. Their conversations, often held during long walks, revolved around materials, form, function, simplicity, and the emotional resonance of objects. Jobs found in Ive a kindred spirit, someone who believed that design was not about appearance, but about the soul of a product. The first iMac launched in 1998 with the slogan, "Think Different," a campaign that perfectly captured Apple's new identity. The ad honored creative pioneers, Einstein, Gandhi, Picasso, Amelia Earhart, and others who challenged norms. Apple wasn't just selling a computer, it was selling a philosophy. And consumers responded. The iMac was a hit. It saved Apple financially and revived its cultural relevance. But Jobs wasn't interested in merely surviving. He wanted Apple to lead again, to push the intersection of technology and liberal arts, to build tools that empowered creativity and to redefine the digital era. He saw a future where computers weren't isolated devices, but hubs connecting a constellation of digital experiences. Cameras, music players, camcorders, all part of a unified ecosystem. This idea would become the foundation for Apple's next revolution. But before Apple embarked on its greatest transformation, a deeper evolution was taking place inside Steve Jobs himself. The exile of Next had humbled him. Pixar had taught him patience, collaboration, and the power of storytelling. Fatherhood had softened some of his harder edges, and loss had taught him clarity. When Jobs returned to Apple, he came not as the fiery, impulsive young founder, but as a wiser, more focused leader. He was still demanding, still intense, still capable of explosive outbursts, but now his energy was directed with purpose. The Apple that emerged under his guidance was not the same company he had left in 1985. It was disciplined, creative, and fiercely innovative. It had a new operating system based on Next, a brilliant design team led by Jony Ive, a simplified product line, a renewed culture of excellence, and most importantly, it had Steve Jobs, not as a volatile visionary, but as a leader who had been reborn. The stage was now set for Apple's most extraordinary chapter. A sequence of innovations that would reshape entire industries, redefine modern technology, and change how human beings interact with the digital world. And it was all about to begin with a device that fit in your pocket.